Hola, welcome to Monkus. In a word, I would say today I feel vulnerable. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, I look around and I realize my daily routine, as much as I would like to believe it's something that's steadfast and that no matter what's out there in the world, I'll always have this. I'll always be comfortable in this. I realize more and more that that's just not true. Things I need. I have a miracle juice that comes out of the wall that powers all the things I own. My coffee I have to the side here, not coffee, tea in this case. That, by the way, I'm going to need talking. I have COVID, so that's not great. But this substance of tea that I enjoy, there's several components to it. For one, it's hot water, and I don't have an ability to make hot water on my own. I use a coffee maker, but that plugs into the wall and uses the miracle juice. But at the end of the day, I have access to that. That goes off to some power plant that generates it for me. And it doesn't have to. At the end, there's nothing really advocating for me except for the fact that I'm willing to pay for it to really make sure that that actually comes through and that actually powers my devices, that actually makes my tea. At the end of the day, if for some reason someone decided to cut off power at that power plant, I would be vulnerable. I would be here and I would not have lights when I flip the switch. And that's hard for us to fathom because when I turn on a switch, you see that direct thing turn on. And you might think that you are activating it, which you are. You're certainly activating. You turn it on, but you don't actually power it. And what's scary to me is that if there was something that were to happen that would knock out a power plant, I would be vulnerable. I was hearing the other day, I think it was in Yemen or somewhere, there were rolling power outages. And that they there have more time with the power off than they have with the power on. And that is really hard for me to wrap my head around. I've grown up with stability. It's here for me. At the end of the day, no matter what's happening out there, as I said, I can have this space. And this space is made better by the fact that I can plug something into this miracle outlet and it does something. Other people in the world don't have that to look back on. And when I realize myself, what makes me different than them? I'm not special. They're not special. They're human and they're able to experience this need. I'm lucky I don't have to. But there's nothing that says I won't. And that's what makes me feel vulnerable. I took a shower this morning and I turned on the water. And I enjoyed it. I kind of went about my process as I typically do and as we take for granted. But that water, the fact that I had a virtually endless supply of water at my disposal is just mind-boggling. And the fact that I had water that I was able to turn and get to the perfect degree of temperature that I was like, this is great. I'm comfortable here. If it was that, be uncomfortable. That's crazy because it doesn't have to be. It has to come from somewhere. Water doesn't just flow out of your walls. It comes from somewhere. A water treatment plant, but even the temperature of the water, that didn't have to be. It was because I have an installed device down in my basement that's able to heat water, a water heater. But it needs natural gas to do so. And where does that come from? And it's just so on and on and on. Everywhere you look, you realize that you're vulnerable. You are so reliant on every level on these things that you don't produce yourself. I was terrified when COVID began and I went to the grocery store and everything was empty. And it made me realize, never in my life did I have to see that, for one. Other countries, other people, they laugh at that. That's how my grocery store looks, you know. Or, even though it was empty for me, what was crazy is I pushed that cart out the door and I realized that I was not going to go hungry. Maybe I didn't have 100 varieties to choose from, but what I had the opportunity to choose from was still plenty enough for me. But it made me feel vulnerable. Because even what I picked up there, if it hadn't been for some person working at Walmart putting that on the shelf, or if it hadn't been for a truck driving down the road and bringing that here, I would not have it. I don't care how much money I have in my bank account or how much I would be willing to pay for these things. If they weren't around, I wouldn't have it. If there wasn't a water treatment plant, no matter how much I'm willing to pay for it, I would not be able to take a hot shower. That's terrifying. Because I don't trust the institutions that are in place right now to ensure that this continues. This level of comfort that I feel around me, I have no reason to believe this will continue. In fact, I have more reason to believe it won't. This is the anomaly. The fact that I'm comfortable, the fact that I'm not hungry. Most human beings ever never had the opportunity to say that. It's hard for me to wrap my head around. But it makes me feel a certain responsibility because I have this miracle juice that comes out of the wall, at least for now. But I have a responsibility because of that to make the world around me better, to ensure that the next generation and the generation after that has this level or better of luxuries, this level or better of a standard of living. It doesn't really make sense to me yet. None of it does. But when I look around, it's going to have to. Very, very soon, it's going to have to make sense. We live in a world that I'm not going to say is coming to an end, but the world as we know it is. As I mentioned, I have COVID. It is really surreal for me to have heard about this only 10 months ago when I was reading and I went, oh, that's that thing across the world in China. And I saw the numbers increasing and I went, yeah. But people my age, oh, yeah, it happens. But I feel it. And it is serious. And I'm lucky. That's the only word I can use. I'm lucky that this virus isn't all that bad for me, for people like me. Who's to say the next one won't be? There's no reason to believe. There's no reason it has to be like this again. And in fact, when I look at the world and I realize that something that affected the world affected me. And that makes sense. It does. But it's hard for us to kind of see ourselves in that. The world is being affected by climate change. Look around. To me, it only makes sense. I do the calculations in my head. I know when I turn my car on, it burns this miracle juice that makes it go. It go burr burr. It doesn't, for one, it doesn't have to. If I didn't have that, it wouldn't. Which is already, again, vulnerable. But to realize that when I burn that, And when I propel my car forward, it is on the back end spitting out pollution. And I believe it's naive for me to look at that and go, yeah, but it's not all that much. It kind of dissipates, it works itself out. Sure, I would like to believe that. But when I look around and I'm stuck in quarantine, I'm looking out the window and I see cars driving by. And then when I start thinking about it, I hear trains in the background going by. And then I think more, and there's planes, and there's cruise ships, and there's so much, and it's all happening all the time. At what point does all of that pollution cause a problem? It has to. We are going to deal with climate change, and it's scary to realize that the world I live in right now, this bubble that I am blessed and privileged to be able to live within, given where the world's going, with times being hard, resources are going to be scarce. There are going to be peoples that are so stressed from its effects. And it's going to be effects we can't even really calculate just yet. I just, going forward, don't see how this bubble of mine can continue. Believing it will, in my mind, is naive. It's naive to assume that, but at the end of the day, the miracle juice will still flow, the water will still flow, I'll still have my tea, and thankfully I'll be able to go to the grocery store and eat. That's naive. It doesn't have to. And I feel vulnerable. Hola. Hola. Welcome to Monkus. Hola. 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 Fuck. Why does saying hola sound weird, man?